The tissue came away from Noah's nose with a bright red streak that made my stomach drop. Third one in the last hour. "Dad, it's happening again," my 8-year-old son said, his voice small and frightened. He tilted his head back like I'd taught him, but the blood just kept coming. I pressed a fresh tissue to his face, feeling that familiar knot of helplessness tighten in my chest. "I know, buddy. I know." This had been going on for 3 weeks now. 3 weeks of nosebleeds that came out of nowhere. 3 weeks of watching my son grow paler, more tired. 3 weeks of doctors telling me everything was fine when clearly it wasn't. My name is Marcus Chen. I'm 36 years old, and 18 months ago, I thought I knew what fear felt like when my marriage to Emily fell apart. I was wrong. Real fear is watching your child deteriorate and having every medical professional tell you you're imagining things. I'm a high school English teacher in Toronto, the kind of guy who believes in following procedures and trusting experts. But my son was bleeding almost daily now, and the experts had run out of answers. It started the weekend after Thanksgiving. Noah came back from his mother's place on Sunday evening, and by Monday morning, his nose was bleeding. Not a lot at first, just a trickle that stopped quickly. Kids get nosebleeds, right? The dry winter air. Maybe he'd been picking at it. I didn't think much of it. But then it happened again Tuesday. And Wednesday. By Friday, it was happening twice a day. I took him to our family doctor, Dr. Grayson, the following Monday. She checked his blood pressure, looked in his nose with that little light, asked about trauma or falls. "Everything looks normal," she said with that practiced reassurance doctors master. "Probably just the heating in your apartment drying out his nasal passages. Use a humidifier, some saline spray." I bought both that afternoon. The bleeding continued. The nosebleeds weren't the only thing. Noah seemed different, quieter. He'd always been an energetic kid, the type who couldn't sit still during dinner, who wanted to play street hockey even when it was -10 outside. Now he came home from school and went straight to his room, clutching that stuffed bear his mother's new girlfriend had given him. Jessica, 29, worked in pharmaceutical sales, moved into Emily's condo 6 months after our divorce was finalized. Noah mentioned her casually at first, the way kids do when they're testing how you'll react. Jessica made pancakes. Jessica took me to the science center. Jessica says I remind her of her little brother. I'd tried to be mature about it, to be the bigger person. Emily had moved on. That was her right. But something about Jessica bothered me, though I couldn't put my finger on what. 2 weeks into the nosebleeds, I took Noah back to Dr. Grayson. This time, she ordered blood work. Complete blood count, clotting factors, the works. I held my son's hand while they drew 4 vials of blood, his thin arm looking impossibly small against the tourniquet. The results came back normal. Everything was normal. "Maybe it's stress?" Dr. Grayson suggested gently. "Divorce can be hard on children. Sometimes it manifests physically." I wanted to argue, to insist this wasn't psychosomatic. But what did I know? I taught teenagers about metaphors and thesis statements. She was the doctor. But then Noah started having these episodes. Not quite seizures, the neurologist said after we spent 4 hours in the emergency room. More like absent seizures, maybe. Brief moments where he'd just stop, stare at nothing, not respond when I called his name. They'd last maybe 10, 15 seconds. Then he'd blink and continue whatever he'd been doing like nothing happened. "Did you notice anything?" I asked him after the first one. "Notice what?" he said, genuinely confused. The episodes only happened on weekends, I realized after keeping a careful log. More specifically, they happened after he came back from his mother's place. Sunday evening or Monday morning, sometimes both. I brought this up to the neurologist, Dr. Kapoor. They'd already done an EEG, found nothing unusual. Now they wanted an MRI. "You think it's related to being at his mother's?" Dr. Kapoor asked, and I caught that subtle shift in tone, the one that suggested I was being a difficult divorced parent, letting my baggage with my ex color my judgment. "I'm just telling you what I've observed," I said carefully. "Children are often more relaxed at one parent's home than another," she said, not unkindly. "The transitions can be stressful. That stress could potentially trigger these episodes." The implication was clear. This was my fault. Noah was stressed because of me, because of how I was handling the custody arrangement. I paid for the MRI out of pocket because our insurance wouldn't cover it without more documentation of medical necessity. $2,300 to lie in a machine for 45 minutes while it took pictures of my son's brain. Normal. Everything was normal. Meanwhile, Noah was getting worse. The nosebleeds were happening twice a day now, sometimes 3 times. He'd started having trouble concentrating at school. His teacher, Mrs. Patterson, called me in for a meeting. "He's just not himself," she said, concern evident in her eyes. "He falls asleep during reading time. Yesterday he couldn't remember his times tables. And Marcus, he knew those cold last month. Is everything okay at home?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I'm trying to figure that out. That Saturday was my weekend with Noah, and I decided we'd have a quiet day. Maybe everyone was right. Maybe he just needed less stimulation, more rest, more stability. We'd stay in, watch movies, order pizza, except we were out of milk, and Noah wanted cereal for breakfast. So Sunday afternoon, I took him to the Loblaws on DuPont Street. Just a quick trip. That's where everything changed. We were in the cereal aisle, Noah holding that bear he'd become inseparable from, when I heard a woman's voice behind me. "Excuse me." I turned to find a woman in her early 60s, gray hair pulled back in a neat ponytail, wearing a University of Toronto sweatshirt. Her face was serious, concerned in a way that made my pulse quicken. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said, "but I couldn't help noticing your son. The stuffed animal he's holding. How long has he had it?" I blinked, caught off guard. "I'm sorry, what?" "The bear. When did he get it?" Noah clutched the bear tighter, stepping slightly behind me. The woman noticed and softened her expression. "I don't mean to frighten anyone," she said quickly. "My name is Dr. Rita Cheng. I'm a retired forensic pathologist. I was just passing by and I noticed that bear and the smell coming from it. I need you to take it from your son right now and put it in your cart. Don't let him hold it anymore." My first instinct was to back away, to protect Noah from this stranger making bizarre demands. But something in her eyes stopped me. Not panic, but the kind of calm, focused concern I'd seen in emergency rooms. The look of someone who knows exactly how serious a situation is. "What are you talking about?" I asked. "That bear smells like naphthalene," she said. "Old mothballs. Strong enough that I could smell it from 3 feet away. If it's as old as it looks, and it's been used as a sleeping toy, that could explain a lot. Has your son been having any symptoms? Headaches? Nosebleeds? Confusion?" My blood went cold. "All of those. Please," she said urgently. "Take the bear away from him right now. We need to talk." I knelt down in front of Noah. "Buddy, can you put Mr. Honey in the cart for a minute?" "Just for a minute." "But I want to hold him," Noah protested. "I know, but please." "For me." He reluctantly placed the bear in the cart's child seat. I stood, heart hammering, and looked at Dr. Cheng. "Is there somewhere we can talk?" she asked. We moved to the small seating area near the Starbucks, inside the store. Noah sat at the table with a cookie, the bear still in the cart a few feet away, while Dr. Cheng and I stood nearby, speaking quietly. "Naphthalene poisoning," she said. "It's rare now, but I saw 2 cases of it in my career. Both times it was from vintage items, things stored with old mothballs. The chemicals leach into fabrics, especially old cotton batting used in toys and pillows. If a child sleeps with something like that, breathing in the fumes night after night, it causes a slow build-up in their system." "What kind of symptoms?" My voice sounded far away. "Nosebleeds, because it damages red blood cells and can affect clotting. Neurological symptoms, headaches, confusion, tremors. In children, sometimes absent seizures." "How long has he had that bear?" "About 3 weeks," I said. "His mother's girlfriend gave it to him. She said she found it at an estate sale, that it was vintage, special." Dr. Cheng's expression darkened. "Does he sleep with it?" "Every night he's at his mother's place. He wants to bring it to my apartment too, but I told him his special toys needed to stay at Mommy's house." I stopped, realization hitting me. That's why the symptoms are worse after his weekends there. That's why they started 3 weeks ago. "You need to get that bear tested," Dr. Cheng said, "and your son needs to see a doctor immediately. Naphthalene poisoning is treatable, but it can cause lasting damage if exposure continues." "Why are you helping us?" I asked. "You don't know us." Her face shifted, and I saw old pain surface. 10 years ago, my daughter Emily kept telling me her boyfriend made her feel dizzy, gave her headaches. I told her it was stress. that she was working too hard at law school. I was a pathologist. I looked at dead people all day and figured out what killed them, but I couldn't see what was happening to my own daughter. She paused, gathering herself. 3 months later, she collapsed. By the time they got her to the hospital, her organs were failing. The autopsy showed chronic arsenic poisoning. He'd been putting it in her tea, small amounts, for months. I'd missed it. I told her it was in her head. "I'm so sorry," I whispered. "She died because I didn't trust her when she said something was wrong," Dr. Cheng said, her voice steady but filled with contained emotion. "Because I thought I knew better. I couldn't save my Emily, but maybe I can help save your Noah. That's why I said something. Because I made a promise to myself that I would never see signs like that, and stay quiet again." I looked over at Noah, nibbling his cookie, looking so small and fragile. "What do I do?" "First, that bear goes in a sealed plastic bag. Don't let your son touch it again. Second, you take him to the emergency room right now and tell them you suspect naphthalene poisoning. They'll run specific tests. Check his methemoglobin levels. Third, you need to find out why that girlfriend gave your son a poison toy. You think she did it on purpose?" "I'm a scientist," Dr. Cheng said. "I don't speculate, but I will say this. People who work in pharmaceutical sales know about drug interactions, about chemistry, about how substances affect the body, and estate sales keep records. If someone spent 20 minutes examining a specific vintage toy, asking questions about its original filling, that might be on security footage." My mind was reeling. Jessica wouldn't. Emily would never. "Your son is sick," Dr. Cheng said firmly. "Right now, that's all that matters. Get him tested. Get that toy analyzed. Then you figure out how it happened." She pulled a business card from her wallet and handed it to me. "Dr. Rita Cheng, M.D., Forensic Pathology." There was a phone number written on the back in pen. "That's my personal cell," she said. "Call me if you need someone to explain the medical findings to doctors who might not take a parent seriously. Sometimes they listen better to another doctor." "Thank you," I managed. "I don't know what else to say." "Save your son," she said. "That's all the thanks I need." Noah protested when I put the bear in a plastic bag I grabbed from the checkout. He cried when I told him Mr. Honey needed to be cleaned, that he couldn't hold him for a while. He was still upset when we walked into the sick kid's emergency room 45 minutes later. "I need someone to test my son for naphthalene poisoning," I told the triage nurse. She looked at me skeptically. "What makes you think it's naphthalene poisoning? He's been having nosebleeds, absence seizures, and fatigue for 3 weeks. He's been sleeping with a vintage stuffed toy that smells strongly of old mothballs." A retired forensic pathologist noticed it and suggested poisoning. Something in my tone must have convinced her, because she nodded and put us in a room within 15 minutes. The ER doctor, Dr. Patel, was younger than me and clearly exhausted from a long shift. She listened to my explanation with growing interest. "Naphthalene poisoning is pretty rare these days," she said, "but your timeline fits. The symptoms fit. Let's run the tests." They took more blood from Noah, who was getting tired of needles. They checked his methemoglobin levels, his liver function, his red blood cell count. While we waited for results, I called Emily. "Marcus? Is everything okay? Where did Jessica get that bear she gave Noah?" A pause. "What? Why? Where did she get it, Emily?" "An estate sale, I think. She said it was vintage, thought Noah would like it." "Why are you asking?" "I'm at Sick Kids. Noah's been sick because of that bear. It's been poisoning him." "What? That's insane." "Marcus, are you seriously accusing Jessica of—" "I'm not accusing anyone of anything yet." I cut her off. "I'm telling you our son has been poisoned by mothballs leaching from a vintage toy. The doctors are running tests right now." "Oh my God." Her voice changed, fear replacing defensiveness. "Is he going to be okay?" "I don't know yet. But he can't be around that bear anymore. Not for a single second." "Of course not." "Marcus, I had no idea." "She just said it was special. That she thought he'd like having something vintage and unique. She seemed so sweet with him." Something in her tone caught my attention. "Seemed? I mean, she is. She's been great with Noah. He really likes her." "But—" Emily hesitated. "It's probably nothing. But sometimes I catch her watching us when Noah and I are together, like she's, I don't know, evaluating something. And she's always suggesting activities that don't include me. Why don't you let me take Noah to the zoo? I can pick him up from school, give you a break. I thought she was just trying to help. Where is she now? At work, I think. Marcus, you really think she did this on purpose? I don't know what to think yet, but I'm going to find out. The test results came back 2 hours later. Dr. Patel's face was grim. Noah's methemoglobin level is elevated, she said. Not dangerously high, but definitely elevated. His red blood cell count is lower than I'd like. The pattern is consistent with chronic, low-level naphthalene exposure. Can you fix it? I asked. Yes. We stop the exposure immediately, which you've already done. His body will clear the naphthalene over the next few weeks. We'll monitor his blood counts, make sure his liver function stays stable. He should make a full recovery. Should? The good news is you caught it early. Another month or two of exposure, we might be looking at permanent damage. As it is, his symptoms should resolve completely within 4 to 6 weeks. I nearly collapsed with relief. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank the person who noticed, Dr. Patel said. Most parents wouldn't have made the connection. Most doctors wouldn't have either. Naphthalene poisoning is something we read about in medical school but almost never see. I called Dr. Cheng from the hospital parking lot while Noah slept in the back seat, exhausted from the ordeal. He's going to be okay, I told her. They confirmed the poisoning. They said if we'd waited much longer. But you didn't wait, she said gently. You trusted your instincts that something was wrong. You kept pushing until you found answers. That's what saved him. You saved him. We saved him together, she said. Now comes the hard part. You need to find out if this was an accident or something more. I sat in the car, watching Noah sleep, and thought about Jessica, about how she'd inserted herself into his life so quickly, about the bear from an estate sale, about Emily's comment that Jessica always wanted to spend time with Noah without Emily there. The next morning, I called the police non-emergency line. The officer who took my statement sounded skeptical at first, but when I mentioned I had medical documentation of naphthalene poisoning and a specific vintage toy as the source, his tone changed. We'll need to send someone to collect the toy for analysis, he said, and we'll want to talk to everyone involved. Detective Sarah Morrison showed up at my apartment that afternoon. She was in her 40s, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Walk me through everything, she said. I told her about the symptoms, the doctors, the chance encounter at Loblaws with Dr. Cheng. I showed her the sealed bag with the bear. She took photos, put the bear in an evidence bag, took my statement. The girlfriend gave your son this toy? She asked. That's what my ex-wife says. Jessica told her she got it at an estate sale, thought Noah would like it. Do you know which estate sale? No. But Dr. Cheng mentioned that estate sales keep records, sometimes have security cameras. Detective Morrison made a note. She was right about that. We'll look into it. Do you think this was deliberate? I asked. I think your son was poisoned by a toy given to him by your ex-wife's girlfriend, she said carefully. Whether that was negligence or intent, that's what I need to find out. Over the next 3 days, Detective Morrison did her job. She found the estate sale where Jessica had purchased the bear. She obtained security footage showing Jessica examining the bear for nearly 25 minutes, asking the sale manager specifically about whether it still had its original filling and if it had been stored with any preservatives. She pulled Jessica's background and found something disturbing. Jessica had been engaged 3 years ago to a man named David Kellerman. He died of carbon monoxide poisoning in his apartment. The death had been ruled accidental, attributed to a faulty furnace. But when Detective Morrison looked closer, she found that David had named Jessica as the beneficiary of his life insurance policy just 2 months before his death. She also found that the furnace company had done a routine maintenance check 1 week before David died, and the furnace was functioning perfectly. It was never properly investigated, Detective Morrison told me during a meeting at the police station. Carbon monoxide deaths usually aren't, especially when there's an obvious source like a furnace. But with what we know now, I'm asking them to reopen it. What about Noah? I asked. What about what she did to him? The lab analyzed the bear. The batting is saturated with naphthalene at levels that shouldn't exist in anything being sold today. It's clearly from the 1960s or earlier, when they used moth crystals heavily in storage. Anyone with basic chemistry knowledge would know that toy was toxic. Jessica works in pharmaceutical sales. Exactly. She has training in how medications and chemicals interact with the body. And according to the estate sale manager, She specifically asked if the bear had been in long-term storage with preservatives. That's not a question an innocent person asks. So she knew. She knew that toy was dangerous. Whether she intended to harm your son or just didn't care, that's for the Crown Attorney to decide. But Marcus, I need to ask you something difficult. Do you know if Jessica has been mentioned in your ex-wife's will? Or if there's any life insurance on your son with Jessica as a beneficiary? I felt sick. I don't know. But Emily and I both have policies on Noah. Standard thing when you get divorced with kids. Covers funeral expenses if... I couldn't finish the sentence. Who are the beneficiaries on those policies? Each other. Emily's the beneficiary on my policy for Noah, and I'm the beneficiary on hers. But if your ex-wife dies, who gets her estate? I saw where she was going. Noah would. He's her only child. And if something happened to Noah after your ex-wife died, her estate would probably go to her next of kin. I thought about it. Her parents are still alive. They'd inherit, unless she'd changed her will to include a long-term partner. I pulled out my phone and called Emily. Did you change your will after you started seeing Jessica? What? Why would you? Did you? She suggested it might be a good idea, Emily said slowly. Since we were getting serious, we both updated our wills last month to include each other. Marcus, what's going on? I looked at Detective Morrison. She's in Emily's will. The detective's expression hardened. Mr. Chen, I think you need to tell your ex-wife to come down to the station. Right now. It took 2 more days of investigation to piece together what Jessica had been planning. They found searches on her laptop about naphthalene poisoning, about symptoms in children, about how long exposure would need to continue to cause permanent damage. They found that she'd taken out a life insurance policy on Emily just 6 weeks earlier, something Emily had agreed to without really thinking about it. A protection for both of us, since they were living together. They found drafts of sympathy letters Jessica had written on her computer, never sent, expressing condolences about little Noah's tragic illness, and how these things sometimes can't be explained, and how she'd be there for Emily through this difficult time. The plan, as Detective Morrison explained it to me, was horrifying in its calculated patience. She gives Noah a toy that will slowly poison him, the detective said. He gets sicker and sicker, but it looks like some mysterious illness. Eventually, he dies. Your ex-wife is devastated. Jessica is there to comfort her, to be her rock through the tragedy. Maybe a year later, maybe less, something happens to your ex-wife. Could be staged as a suicide, grief over losing her child. Could be another accident like the carbon monoxide. Either way, Jessica inherits everything. The life insurance, the estate, the condo. She was going to kill my son and then kill Emily? That's what the evidence suggests. Your son was just the first step, a way to emotionally devastate your ex-wife and set up future opportunities. I thought I might be sick. But why? Why go through all this? According to her internet history, she's done this before. We're coordinating with police in British Columbia now. She was engaged to someone there 5 years ago. He died in a hiking accident. She collected his life insurance and moved to Ontario 2 months later. How many people has she killed? We're still investigating. But Marcus, she targeted your ex-wife specifically. She met her at a pharmaceutical conference, started a relationship, moved fast. Emily has a good job, a nice condo, and most importantly, a child. Jessica seems to prefer scenarios where she can play the tragic figure, the loving partner who loses someone to illness or accident. It makes people sympathetic, makes them less likely to suspect. A grieving mother who then succumbs to her grief? That's a complete package for someone like her. Jessica was arrested at work 3 days later. The charges were attempted murder, child endangerment, and fraud. The investigation into David Kellerman's death was officially reopened, and police in British Columbia were looking into the hiking death as well. Emily came to my apartment the day after Jessica's arrest. She looked like she'd aged 10 years. "I'm so sorry," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I brought her into his life. I led her around our son. Marcus, I'm so sorry." "You didn't know," I said, and meant it. None of us knew. She was good at hiding it. But you suspected something was wrong. You kept pushing when the doctors said everything was fine. You saved him. Dr. Cheng saved him. If she hadn't been at that grocery store, if she hadn't noticed, I couldn't finish. We stood there in my living room, Two divorced people who'd barely been civil to each other for 18 months, bonded now by the knowledge of how close we'd come to losing everything that mattered. Noah recovered slowly over the next 6 weeks. The nosebleeds stopped first, then the episodes of confusion and absence seizures. His energy came back gradually, like someone turning up a dimmer switch little by little. By March, he was back to his old self, playing street hockey in the driveway and bouncing off the walls at dinner time. Emily and I worked out a new custody arrangement, one that felt less adversarial now. We'd both been reminded, in the worst possible way, how fragile everything was. I met with Dr. Cheng for coffee one Saturday morning at a place in the annex. Noah was with Emily, and I wanted to thank the woman who'd saved my son's life properly, without the chaos of hospital waiting rooms and police investigations. "How's he doing?" she asked. "Perfect. Completely back to normal. The doctors say there's no lasting damage." "Good." She smiled, but I could see the sadness in her eyes, the knowledge that she'd saved my son but couldn't save her own daughter. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "Why were you so sure? When you saw Noah with that bear, how did you know to say something?" She was quiet for a moment, stirring her coffee. "Because I've spent the last 10 years learning to recognize the signs I missed with Emily. I read every case study about poisoning I could find. I memorized symptoms, patterns, methods, not because it would bring her back, but because I needed to do something with the guilt. I needed to make her death mean something." "It does mean something," I said. "It means Noah is alive. It means Emily is alive. Because you paid attention, because you said something when you could have just kept walking." "That's what I hope," she said softly. "That's why I volunteer at the women's shelter now. Why I teach self-defense classes. Why I stop strangers in grocery stores when I notice things that might be dangerous. I couldn't save Emily, but maybe I can save someone else's Emily, someone else's Noah." We talked for another hour, about everything and nothing, about how trauma changes you, about how you learn to live with guilt and loss, about how sometimes the only thing you can do is try to make sure the tragedy doesn't repeat itself somewhere else. The trial was 8 months later. Jessica pleaded not guilty, claimed she had no idea the bear was dangerous, that it was all a tragic accident. But the evidence was overwhelming. The internet searches, the suspicious deaths in her past, the methodical way she'd inserted herself into Emily's life, the insurance policies, the unsent sympathy letters. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. She got 15 years for attempted murder and child endangerment, with another potential sentence pending if they could prove she'd killed David Kellerman. The hiking death in British Columbia was still under investigation. I attended every day of the trial. Emily sat beside me, both of us needing to see it through to the end, needing to watch the woman who'd tried to destroy our family face justice. On the day of sentencing, the judge asked if I wanted to make a victim impact statement. I'd written one, practiced it, but when I stood up to deliver it, I found myself saying something different. "Your Honor, I'm a high school English teacher. I teach kids about critical thinking, about questioning what they read, about trusting their own analysis, even when it goes against the accepted interpretation. But when it came to my own son, I almost failed to do the same thing. Multiple doctors told me he was fine. Multiple experts told me I was overreacting, that I was being a difficult divorced parent, that I was letting my emotions cloud my judgment, and I almost believed them. I almost stopped pushing for answers. What saved my son wasn't just the incredible luck of meeting Dr. Cheng in that grocery store. What saved him was that I trusted my instincts even when no one else did. I trusted that I knew my son, that I could see something was wrong even when the tests said otherwise. I think about all the other parents out there who are being told their concerns are nothing, who are being dismissed as overprotective or anxious or difficult. How many of them stop pushing because they trust the experts more than they trust themselves? My son is alive because I didn't stop, because one doctor believed me enough to run the right tests, because a stranger cared enough to say something when she noticed something wrong. But it shouldn't have been that hard. It shouldn't have taken that much luck. I looked at Jessica then, sitting at the defense table in her neat suit, her face carefully blank. "She almost won," I continued. "She almost killed my son, and then my ex-wife, because she bet that no one would notice, that no one would care enough to look closely. She bet that people would trust the normal over the suspicious, would accept the obvious explanation rather than dig deeper. And she was almost right. The judge sentenced her to 15 years, with a recommendation that she never be allowed to work in healthcare or pharmaceuticals again. It wasn't enough, could never be enough, but it was something. Outside the courthouse, Emily and I stood on the steps while Noah chased pigeons on the plaza below, full of energy and life. He doesn't really remember most of it, Emily said quietly. The doctors say that's common with that kind of poisoning. The memory issues. He just knows that he was sick, and now he's better. Maybe that's for the best, I said. Maybe. She watched our son jump and laugh, 8 years old and innocent of how close he'd come to never being 9. Marcus, I need to say something. You were right, about all of it. You knew something was wrong when no one else did. You saved him. We saved him, I corrected. You, me, Dr. Cheng, Dr. Patel, Detective Morrison, all of us. But you started it. You refused to accept that everything was fine when you could see it wasn't. We watched Noah for another moment in silence. I'm going to be more careful, Emily said finally, about who I let into his life, about who I trust, about listening when he says something feels wrong. Me too, I said. Dr. Cheng met us for dinner that evening, the 4 of us at a family-friendly place in Liberty Village. Noah was shy with her at first, didn't remember her from the grocery store, but she was patient and kind, asking him about school and hockey and his favorite subjects. Are you really a doctor? Noah asked her over pizza. I was, she said. Now I'm retired, but I still help people sometimes. My dad says you helped me when I was sick. Your dad helped you, she said gently. He knew something was wrong and he didn't give up until he found out what. That's what parents do. They protect their children, even when it's hard. After dinner, as we were saying goodbye, Dr. Cheng pulled me aside. I want you to remember something, she said. What happened to Noah? It could happen to any child. Toxic old toys, lead paint, mold, dangerous people hiding in plain sight. The world is full of things that can hurt our kids. That's a terrifying thought, I said. It is, she agreed. But here's what I've learned. You can't protect your children from everything. You can't watch them every second. Can't control every variable. What you can do is pay attention. Trust your instincts. Believe your child when they say something feels wrong. And most importantly, don't stop asking questions just because someone with authority tells you to. She handed me a small card. I run a workshop now, teaching parents how to recognize signs of poisoning, abuse, manipulation. It's at the women's shelter once a month. I'd love it if you came. Maybe shared your story. Parents need to hear from other parents who've been through this. I'll be there, I said. That night, after Noah was asleep in his bed, I sat in my living room and thought about everything that had happened, about how close we'd come to losing him, about all the moments where things could have gone differently, if I'd trusted the doctors and stopped seeking answers, if Dr. Cheng had been shopping somewhere else that day, if Jessica had chosen a slower poison, one that didn't have such obvious symptoms, but also, if I hadn't trusted my instincts, if I hadn't kept detailed records of Noah's symptoms, if I hadn't taken him seriously when he said something felt wrong, if I'd been too proud or too tired or too defeated to keep pushing. I pulled out my laptop and started writing, not for me, but for other parents who might be in the same situation someday. Parents who are being told their concerns are nothing, who are being dismissed or patronized or made to feel like they're overreacting. I wrote about the 5 signs Dr. Cheng had taught me to watch for. First, symptoms that only happen around a specific person or in a specific place. If your child is fine at school but sick every weekend at dad's house, that means something. Don't let anyone tell you it's coincidence. Second, symptoms that improve when a specific item is removed. If your child is healthier when they don't sleep with that toy, when they don't wear that piece of jewelry, when they don't eat at that restaurant, trust that pattern. Third, when doctors can't explain what's wrong but something is clearly wrong. Normal test results don't mean nothing is happening. They mean whatever is happening isn't showing up in those specific tests. Keep looking. Fourth, gifts from people who have something to gain from your child being sick or your family falling apart. It sounds paranoid, but Jessica targeted us specifically because Emily had assets she wanted. She was patient, methodical, and she used our son as a tool. Fifth, your own instincts. You know your child better than any doctor, any expert, any authority figure. If something feels wrong, Keep pushing until you find out what. I posted it on a parenting forum, expecting maybe a few people to read it. Within a week, it had been shared 10,000 times. Parents from all over were commenting, sharing their own stories of being dismissed, of having their concerns ignored, of trusting experts over their own judgment and regretting it. Some of the stories were heartbreaking. Children who'd suffered for months or years because no one believed the parent who said something was wrong. But there were also stories of hope, of parents who'd read my post and decided to push harder for answers, who'd discovered allergies or abuse or illnesses that had been missed. One woman wrote to thank me because my post had made her insist on more testing for her daughter, leading to a diagnosis of a rare autoimmune disorder that would have been fatal if left untreated much longer. Another father said he'd been about to give up on finding out why his son had mysterious bruises, but after reading my story, he'd pushed for one more investigation that revealed his ex-wife's boyfriend was abusing the child. The stories kept coming, and with each one, I thought about Dr. Cheng's words, about how she couldn't save her own daughter, but maybe she could save someone else's, about how tragedy could be transformed into meaning if we let it teach us something. Noah turned 9 that spring. We had a party at a climbing gym, invited his whole class, watched him scale walls and navigate obstacles with the kind of fearless energy that only healthy children possess. Emily and I split the cost and planning, working together in a way we hadn't since before the divorce. He has no idea, Emily said, watching him attempt a particularly challenging wall. No idea how close we came to this not happening. Good, I said. Let him be a kid. Let him climb walls and eat too much cake and not know about locked storage units with evidence bags or court dates or any of it. I still have nightmares, she admitted quietly, about what would have happened if Dr. Cheng hadn't been there, if you hadn't taken him to that specific grocery store on that specific day. I used to have those too, I said, but I'm trying to focus on what did happen instead of what might have. He's here. He's healthy. We caught it in time. Dr. Cheng showed up near the end of the party, bringing a gift wrapped in bright paper. Noah opened it to find a chemistry set, age-appropriate but real, with actual experiments and safety goggles. Your dad tells me you're interested in science, she said. I thought you might like to learn some chemistry. Noah's eyes lit up. This is so cool. Dad, can we do experiments tonight? After your friends leave, I promised. Later, as the party wound down and parents collected their sugar-high children, Dr. Cheng and I stood by the climbing walls, watching Noah show off for his remaining friends. I got a letter from Detective Morrison last week, she said. They proved Jessica killed David Kellerman. They're adding murder charges, and the case in British Columbia is moving forward too. She might never get out of prison. Good, I said, and meant it. I've been thinking about Emily, Dr. Cheng said. My Emily, about how she kept telling me something was wrong, and I didn't listen. I keep wondering what would have happened if I had. If I'd taken her seriously, instead of assuming she was stressed or overworked or anxious. You can't change it, I said gently. Believe me, I've spent enough time on the what-ifs to know they don't help. No, she agreed, but I can make sure other people don't make the same mistake. That's why I do the workshops, why I teach parents to trust themselves. It's not going to bring her back, but maybe it prevents the next one. She'd be proud of you, I said. Your daughter, for turning your grief into something that helps people. Dr. Cheng smiled, sad but genuine. I hope so. I really do. That summer, I started teaching a unit in my English classes about critical thinking and trusting your analysis. I used my own experience as a case study, talked about how authority figures can be wrong, how normal doesn't always mean healthy, how questioning the accepted interpretation can save lives. My students were fascinated, asked a million questions about the investigation and the trial. But what surprised me was how many of them had their own stories of not being believed, of adults dismissing their concerns, of being told they were overreacting, or too sensitive, or making things up. My mom keeps saying I'm fine, one girl told me after class. But I'm not fine. I'm tired all the time, and my hands shake, and she just says it's stress from school. But what if it's not? I gave her Dr. Cheng's card. Go see this doctor. Tell her Mr. Chen sent you. She'll help you figure out what's really going on. The girl did, and it turned out she had a thyroid condition that had gone undiagnosed for 2 years. She got treatment, got better, and her mother apologized for not listening sooner. I lost count of how many students I gave Dr. Cheng's card to that year, how many parents I referred to her workshops, how many conversations I had about trusting yourself when something feels wrong, about not accepting dismissal from people who don't know your situation as well as you do. By the time Noah turned 10, the story had been featured in several news articles about medical advocacy and parental rights. Journalists wanted to interview me. Documentary filmmakers wanted to tell the story. I turned most of them down, but I said yes to one podcast that focused on true crime with an educational angle. The episode came out in October, and within a week, my inbox was flooded with messages. Parents thanking me for sharing the warning signs. Adult children realizing their symptoms as kids had been dismissed when they shouldn't have been. Doctors writing to say the episode had made them commit to listening more carefully to parental concerns. One message stood out. It was from a woman named Patricia Holbrook in Calgary. "I listened to your podcast yesterday," she wrote. "My 7-year-old daughter has been having headaches and dizziness for 6 weeks. 3 doctors have told me it's nothing. But after hearing your story, I insisted on more tests. They found a brain tumor. They're operating next week. If I hadn't heard your story, if I'd accepted those doctors' dismissals, my daughter would have died. You saved her life." I showed the email to Noah, who was old enough now to understand more of what had happened to him. "That's because of you?" he asked. "It's because Dr. Cheng noticed something and said something," I told him, "and because I listened to my instincts instead of accepting what I was being told. And now that little girl's mom is doing the same thing. So you saved her?" "We all saved each other," I said. "That's how it works. Someone helps you, and then you help someone else, and it keeps going." Noah thought about that. "I want to help people too when I grow up." "You will," I promised. "You already do, just by being okay, by being here. You're proof that trusting yourself and speaking up can save lives." 3 years after the trial, I was invited to speak at a medical conference about patient advocacy and parental rights in diagnosis. Dr. Cheng was speaking too, on recognizing subtle signs of poisoning and abuse. Emily came with me, wanting to support the message, even though speaking publicly about what had happened was difficult for her. The room was packed with doctors, nurses, social workers, and child protection workers. I stood at the podium and looked out at all those faces, all those people who held power over desperate parents seeking answers. "My son was dying," I began, and I was told repeatedly that I was wrong, that I was overreacting, that everything was fine. If I had believed those experts, Noah would be dead right now. That's not an exaggeration. That's a documented medical fact. I walked them through the timeline, the symptoms, the dismissals, the chance encounter that changed everything. "I'm not here to bash doctors," I said. "I'm grateful for Dr. Patel, who ran the right tests. I'm grateful for Dr. Kapoor, who ordered the MRI, even though she was skeptical. I'm grateful for every medical professional who helped my son recover. But I'm also here to tell you that parents know their children in ways you never will. We see them every day. We know they're normal. We know when something is off, even when we can't articulate exactly what or why. When a parent comes to you and says, 'Something is wrong with my child,' please consider that they might be right, even when your tests say they're not. Please consider that your 5 minutes of observation doesn't outweigh their months or years of intimate knowledge. Please consider that dismissing a parent's concerns because they don't have a medical degree might be the difference between that child living and dying." The room was silent when I finished. Then someone started clapping, and soon the whole room was applauding. A few doctors had tears in their eyes. During the Q&A, one doctor raised her hand. "How do we balance taking parents seriously with the reality that many parental concerns really are just anxiety or normal childhood illness?" "You investigate," I said simply. "You take the concerns seriously enough to rule things out methodically instead of dismissing it immediately. You document, you follow up, you create a paper trail that shows you took the parents seriously, even if ultimately everything is fine, because the cost of being wrong when you dismiss a real concern is a dead child. The cost of being wrong when you investigate an anxious parent is some time and maybe some unnecessary tests. I know which error I'd rather make." Another doctor asked, "What if the parent is clearly making things up or exaggerating for attention?" Dr. Cheng stood up from her seat in the audience. "Then you still investigate, and your investigation will reveal that. But I've seen too many cases where a parent was labeled as anxious or attention-seeking, and it turned out their child was being abused or poisoned or had a rare condition that didn't show up on standard tests. The Munchausen by proxy diagnosis, in particular, gets thrown around far too easily, often at mothers who are simply being persistent advocates for genuinely sick children. The questions continued for another hour. By the end, several doctors approached us with their own stories of times they'd dismissed parental concerns and been wrong, times they'd almost missed something critical. I had a case 5 years ago, one pediatrician admitted. Mother kept insisting her son was being drugged by her ex-husband during custody visits. I thought she was just trying to make the ex look bad in the custody battle. Turned out he was giving the kid Benadryl every night to make him sleep so he could go out drinking. By the time we figured it out, the kid had developed kidney damage from chronic overdose. "Did you change your practice?" Dr. Cheng asked. "I did," the pediatrician said. "Now I investigate every persistent concern, even when I think it's probably nothing. Better safe than sorry." "Exactly," Dr. Cheng said. "Better safe than sorry." On the flight home, Emily leaned her head on my shoulder, exhausted from the emotional weight of reliving everything. "Do you think we're making a difference?" she asked. "All this talking? All these workshops and conferences?" "Patricia Holbrook's daughter is alive because we shared our story," I said. "I got an email last month from a father in Nova Scotia who pushed for an allergy test after hearing the podcast. Found out his daughter had celiac disease that was destroying her intestines. Another parent in Saskatchewan caught signs of abuse because they'd learned the warning signs at Dr. Cheng's workshop." "So yes," Emily said, "we're making a difference." "We're making a difference," I agreed. Noah is 13 now, a teenager who towers over his mother and is rapidly catching up to me. He plays hockey competitively, excels in science, wants to be a forensic pathologist, like Dr. Cheng. He remembers almost nothing about being poisoned, just vague memories of being sick and then getting better. But he knows the story. We've told him, age appropriately, as he's gotten older. He knows about Jessica, about the trial, about how close everything came to being very different. He knows about Dr. Cheng and her daughter Emily, about how tragedy can be transformed into meaning. Last month, he came home from school with a permission slip for a chemistry field trip. Emily had to sign off on it too, and we met for coffee to discuss it, the way we do for most major parenting decisions now. "It's a good program," Emily said, reading through the details. "University professors teaching advanced chemistry to gifted students." "He's excited about it," I said. "Hasn't stopped talking about it all week." We signed the form together, co-parents united in supporting our son's interests and protecting his safety. So different from the angry, bitter people we'd been during the divorce. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if none of this had occurred," Emily admitted. "If Jessica had never come into my life, if Noah had never gotten sick, would we still barely be speaking? Would we still be fighting over custody schedules and holiday arrangements?" "Probably," I said honestly. "It took almost losing him for us to remember what actually matters." "I hate that it took that," Emily said. "But I'm grateful we learned the lesson while we still could." Last week, Dr. Cheng invited us to a ceremony at the women's shelter where she volunteers. They were dedicating a new resource center for families dealing with domestic violence and abuse. The Emily Cheng Memorial Resource Center, named after her daughter. Emily believed in helping people, Dr. Cheng said in her speech. She was studying to be a lawyer, wanted to work in family law, protecting children and vulnerable adults. She never got the chance to do that work, but this center will do it in her name, will help the people she wanted to help. She looked at us in the audience, at Noah sitting between Emily and me. "And it's funded in part by the Awareness Through Tragedy Foundation, started by a family who took their own near tragedy and turned it into something that helps others." That's what Emily would have wanted. That's what all of us who've lost people should want, to make sure their absence means something, creates something, saves someone. The foundation was Emily's idea, actually. My ex-wife Emily, not Dr. Cheng's daughter. She'd proposed it a year after the trial, suggesting we use the money from the lawsuit against Jessica's insurance and the estate sale company to create something permanent. Now, the Awareness Through Tragedy Foundation funds medical advocacy programs, teaches parents how to be persistent and effective in healthcare settings, provides legal support for parents whose concerns are being dismissed, and offers grants for medical testing when insurance won't cover it. We've helped 43 families so far. 43 children who might have died or suffered permanent damage, now healthy and thriving because their parents had the tools and support to keep pushing for answers. Noah stood up at the ceremony and read a statement we'd prepared together. My name is Noah Chen. When I was 8 years old, someone tried to kill me. I don't remember much about it, but I know it happened because a stranger cared enough to say something, because my dad trusted his instincts, and because my mom supported the investigation, even when it hurt to learn the truth. I'm 13 now. I'm healthy. I play hockey, and I'm good at science, and I have friends, and I have a future. All because people noticed, and people spoke up, and people listened. This resource center is for other kids like me, and for their parents who need help being heard. Because everyone deserves someone who notices. Everyone deserves someone who speaks up. Everyone deserves to be listened to when they say something is wrong. That's what my par